And now let's get started with the program. It is with great pleasure that I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker for today, a luminary in the world of artificial intelligence and a beloved member of CSAIL, Professor Tomas Lozano Perez. Now, Tomas's contributions to AI and robotics have revolutionized the way we perceive and interact with technology. His work blends elegant theory with practical applications and encapsulates the spirit of transformative thinking. It pushes the boundaries to what's possible and challenges us to reimagine the future. Tomas, I learned last night, is also responsible for coining our name, CSAIL, 20 years ago when LCS and the AI Lab merged. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to a visionary, a pioneer, and a true thought leader in artificial intelligence, and a CSAIL member, Tomas Lozano Perez. Sorry, Tomas. I'll just get this.
Sorry, the person described by Daniela didn't show up, so I'm going to have to fill in. Let me see if I can. Okay, let's see, I get to give an old guy talk, which is great. So I'm going to be reminiscing a little bit. 60 years ago, I arrived in this country as a Cuban refugee. So I can't talk about what CSAIL was like at that point. But 10 years later, I was at MIT, so I've been here for 50 years. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my reflections on computing the future, or what, at least my experience in terms of doing things that were so far ahead of their time that they were completely forgotten and so on. So just to kind of reflect on different ways in which we have impact on the world. Okay, so I'm going to start, in fact, 50 years ago. In 1973, I was a senior at MIT, and I was doing a bachelor's thesis for Patrick Winston and Bertolt Horn. So I went into their office, and they said, they gave me a circuit board. Many of you don't remember what circuit boards look like, but it was a piece of plastic, and it had resistors on it, and transistors, and so on. And they said, find the resistors. Okay, how? No idea. So, I went off, and my project was to find resistors on circuit boards. This is 1973, so. And I came up with this ridiculous idea, which involved checking the intensity profile along the lines and whether they go up and down and stuff like that. And, it was a bachelor's thesis. It led to my first published paper by myself, which was great. But let me tell you a couple of things. Okay, so how do I find a picture of a resistor, right? 1973, okay. So these are, by the way, the drawings in my bachelor's thesis. So there was this thing called the vivisector, which was this device that kind of counted photons, and it kind of scanned across the scene counting photons. In order to do that, you had to have a lot of photons, so you'd have very bright lights, Klieg lights, focused on the circuit board. And I used to sit in front of the PDP-6 and watch the lines, of the image start kind of going like this, showing up on an old display. And one day I was, trying to take a picture of the thing, and I noticed that it's getting blurry. So I look over there, and the circuit board is on fire. It was covered with varnish, and it had caught fire, right? So I rush over there and make sure nobody's around. Oh my God, I'm in trouble. And eventually, I pulled the lights back on, and I got a picture. So my thesis was based on one picture. I mean, there was no way I was going to do more than one picture. The question, comes up. did this have any impact? So, okay, I don't know, okay? So, I did this thesis and I published a paper and so on. However, if you went, I went 20 years later, I went on a trip to Japan to having to do with, patents. And I was taken through, dozens of facilities in which they were doing printed circuit boards and inspection and automatic manufacturing and so on. And computer vision was everywhere. Like every machine had computer vision on it. And I'm going, this is amazing. 20 years later, 20 years ago, I thought that this thing, had, zero potential. Right? It was very easy to diagnose the circuit boards because after you burned them up, you could say with full confidence that they wouldn't work. So, it was, like, what impact did this have? And I realized that it has the same kind of impact that science fiction does. Right? So many of us were inspired to go into this field because of science fiction, robots and so on. And thinking the idea that you could do a practical application with computer vision, circuit boards, those guys, it wasn't me, Winston and Horn and so on, the people who were thinking about that, were kind of laying a groundwork for a different kind of, for the future. They were really computing the future. And that's a kind of interesting way of having impact on the world. Today I went and looked online for applications of computer vision in the electronic industry, and this was the index of the page, and it went off in a million directions. So it's very interesting. I don't think that in 1973 there were very many people trying to do this, but today it's like endemic. And I had nothing to do with it, but it was exciting to be part of that at the time. Let me switch gears. After my bachelor's degree, I worked at the AI lab for a year, and we had a guest, Hiroshika Inoue from Japan, who was doing, who is a pioneer in force-controlled robots. And in the AI lab, we had this little robot, which was called the Little Robot. That's a picture. It was built by David Silver, a staff member at the lab at the time. And Inoue used it to do an assembly of parts. And it was fantastic. I mean, you looked at it, and he'd come up with all kinds of little cool ways of trying to deal with the uncertainty in the positioning of the parts by tilting them, introducing deliberate errors in the initial assembly, and so on. It was like, how did he do that? It was fantastic. It really triggered my interest in robotics, and I went off and I tried to do one of these by myself. I tried to assemble a little. It was an aircraft engine, model aircraft engine part, and to see if I could do it with the little robot. And so I spent months trying to get this to work. And it's finding the parts by pushing down and feeling pressure, and then trying to infer where the part was and the orientation based on the pressure patterns that it found. And it was, it was fun. And I learned quite a bit from that. And what I kind of figured out was that programming robots was not about sequence. It was obvious what the sequence of operations you wanted to do was. But the hard part was dealing with the geometry and the physics of the situation. And I came up with this idea of trying to represent the geometry in a set of parameters of the robot's degrees of freedom, which eventually became known as the configuration space approach to doing motion planning. I'll talk about that a little more. I then went off to IBM for a while after I finished my master's thesis, and I worked there as a postdoc, but I was just really a master's student. We came up with a technique for planning the motions of the robot in the configuration space. This is the visibility graph method in configuration space, and I wrote this paper, which is still cited today with my colleague, Mike Wesley. There was an interesting story because IBM, after I was there, I said, I'm going to go back to MIT, so I want to work on something that's not confidential. So they said, oh yeah, well, nobody's going to care about robots, right? So, go ahead. So when I did this, they said, oh, this is kind of interesting. maybe has some applications. So I think we're going to declare it confidential. And I had some issues with that. I got to meet the vice president of research at IBM and everything, with his lawyers. And eventually we reached a compromise. The compromise was you could publish the algorithm, but not say that it had been implemented. So I said, huh? So we published this paper, which was an algorithm with no implementation. So it was a big hit with the theoreticians, like computational. Oh yeah, this is awesome. It's the first, optimal algorithm for doing motion planning, and it's just proofs. It's fantastic. But my colleague Mike Wesley, who passed away, I'm sorry to say, snuck a picture of the implementation in a paper that he published because he had never agreed to that. So anyway, so that was fun. So anyway, I came back to MIT, did my PhD on the configuration space applies to motion planning, and I had some issues with publication. It took 3 years to publish the paper that came out of that thesis. But anyway, we made it through, and I joined the MIT faculty in '81, and I spent a bunch of years kind of extending this idea and making it the basis of approaches to doing motion planning with real robots. And we implemented it, and so I no longer was allowed to talk to theoreticians at that point. And then, we actually got robots to move. My talk shrank from 30 minutes to 15 minutes, so I'm not going to play you all the pictures, all the videos. But anyway, we were able to, at that time, generate robots that could actually do sequences of motions planned completely on their own without any steps given by a human. Oh yeah, this is an experience that everybody who's done robotics is familiar with. So then I was very proud of this, and I went to give talks and stuff like that about this. And there was always one comment that was always given: it's too slow, right? So in fact, this was, it was doing a lot of computation and stuff like that, and everybody, it didn't matter what it did. It was always, it's too slow. Can't we just do potential fields? I don't even want to go into the potential field idea, but anyway, everybody, that's a common reaction. So, fast forward 20 years. This turns out to be the answer to everything, right? You fast forward 20 years, and a lot of people were doing motion planning. Today, if you fast forward to today, there's a company down the road, Real-Time Robotics, and they're doing motion planning, in real time. It's become the foundation. Every automatic car does motion planning. Motion planning is everywhere. But it took a long time. Now, the thing about this is it also had a bunch of applications that were unexpected. So, I had thought about robots and stuff like that, but this is done by some colleagues in France. They had the problem of, the A380 had to be built in every country in Europe, right, because it's Europe. But they had to assemble it in Toulouse, so they had to bring all the parts from the A380 to Toulouse. So the thing you have to realize is the wing is 50 meters long, right? And they have to drive it through towns like this to get to Toulouse. So an interesting motion planning problem is, how do you drive the truck from the sea to Toulouse with a 50-meter wing through those little towns? That just blew my mind. It's a real unexpected application of this technology. Now, the thing is, this particular sort of impact story was very different from the first one. This one I was very heavily involved with. I went, I was giving talks all the time, doing this, a lot, and trying to get people involved and having guests, in the lab, and, a lot of people. I really worked at this, as opposed to that first one, which happened like you throw something up and maybe inspire someone. This was actually, hard work. Anyway, I got a little fed up around this time because with the slow pace of adoption, because remember, I had to wait 20 years to see it actually happen. So instead, I decided to do something different. I'm already running out of time. Okay, anyway. I spent a few years working on computational chemistry and biology. And the first problem that we looked at, this was with a little startup, was telling the difference between musks, molecules that smell like musk. There's only 2 naturally occurring molecules that smell like musk. But there's a whole synthetic set of musks which were developed for laundry detergent, so that they would stand up to being washed. And musks are used to carry other scents because they last forever. And so it's an interesting thing. And the thing about these molecules is that very similar molecules, I mean, you make a slight change to the molecule and it goes from smelling like a musk to not. Kind of weird, so it was interesting. But okay, I have another one of my little anecdotes that I'm putting here so you don't fall asleep. We were working with a company, a Swiss company that does fragrances and flavors. There is such a thing. And we went to this company to visit, and it was amazing. One thing that was amazing was a group of like 50 chemists in one room trying to figure out how to make something that tasted like pineapple. And, oh, no, what if you add an oxygen here? Oh, no. I had never imagined such a thing happening, but there were a bunch of Swiss people doing that. That was amazing. And then we were walking through the labs, and on the labs is something that looks like this. It's a rose in a glass jar with a hose attached to it. And I say, what is that? And they said, oh, we're pumping the air from the rose to capture the molecules that are the smell of the rose so that we can replicate it synthetically. To me, this has become, or has been for many years, a symbol of the interaction of science and art. But anyway, what we were trying to do is figure out how to use machine learning to tell the difference between a musk and a non-musk. Okay, this was 1990, so this was not the run-of-the-mill thing that people were doing at the time. At the time, when you did machine learning, the first thing you ask is, what are the features that you're going to use? So we decided that instead of using the structure of the molecule, the bonds, we were going to use the molecular surface defined by of the molecule and do measurements of like if you put the molecule in one of those torture devices that have a lot of spikes, how far in do they go? That's the set of features. So we decided to try to do that. Now, the trouble with that is the molecules are flexible. So as the conformation changes, the set of features changes, but whether the molecule is active or not does not change. So you have an interesting problem in which you have instances labeled, but you don't have a single feature set. What you have is a bag of instances that have the same label. And you know from that if the bag is negative, none of those entries are active. But if the bag is positive, you don't know which one of them is active. So it's an interesting machine learning problem, which we called multiple instance learning. And it was interesting. We came up with different algorithms for doing this. My student, Oded Maron, came up with an idea called diverse density, which we published for doing this kind of stuff. And I was involved in a startup, as I said. So at one point, I had to meet this big pharma exec. So we were trying to sell him and give him a pitch on this technology, machine learning for drug discovery. That was the pitch, right, in 1990. And it was interesting. He tore me to shreds. He didn't hold back. It was like, oh my God, everybody knows that you need to do this, and everybody knows that you need to do that, and that couldn't possibly work. And it was amazing. Like, I ran away. Okay, of course, if you fast forward 20 years later, the idea of machine learning to do drug discovery is, common. One of the things that's interesting is that the approach that we were using for this kind of weird drug discovery problem turned out to be actually quite useful in other areas. So for example, you can think of many vision applications as having the same structuring, which you say there's someone in this image, but I don't know where. So you can take a lot of feature vectors from associated with an image, and you know which is positive and which is negative, but only at the image level. So this actually there's a little cottage industry of papers. This has become my most highly cited paper over a period of 50 years, mostly from China. There's hundreds of papers on multiple instance learning, most of them in computer vision. But I want to show you my favorite. So, I mean, you guys can brag about your companies and all your impact, but I mean, how many of you have helped detect horror images? Okay, so I probably don't have time, but anyway, I'll keep going for a sec. So I work with Eric Grimson. He used to be a real person. Now he's an administrator, a very important person. This is being recorded, right? Oh. Sorry, Eric, I love you. We worked together for 20 years. We did a lot of stuff on model-based object recognition. I don't have time. But the one project that we worked on almost made me into a productive member of society. That is, somebody who could do stuff that had kind of direct impact. We worked on stereotaxis, automatic stereotaxis, and we developed a system which, the patient, you would be scanned with a laser, then you would align their MRI with the patient on the table, and you could look into them and, plan your operation. And, it was actually tried at Brigham's and so on. So, this was the kind of impact that we talked about. Like, right away, you did something, and it was used. And I went to a medical robotics conference at NYU. I remember this like it was yesterday. A guy gets up and says, let me tell you about this new method of doing maxillary molar operations. And I go, okay, I wonder what he's talking about. His first words were, first you remove the skin. Okay. And I'm going, okay, that's enough for me. I'm going to do something else, okay? So it was back to the future. Let's do robotics, and let's try to figure out why in-OS assembly really worked, okay? And I started working with Leslie Cabling, 20 years ago, and it's been great. Well, great for me. She had to put up with me. So anyway, and the problem that we were looking at is basically long-term autonomous mobile manipulation. And the thing that was interesting about this is that it brought together pretty much everything we had done over a period of 40 years independently. And it brought together the kind of motion planning stuff that I did, the kind of probabilistic reasoning stuff that she did, and we put it all together. And as opposed to today, where all you need is attention, is the keyword, for transformers. This is actually a synthesis of everything that we had done before, and we wanted to put it together and actually get it to run on robots. Again, I'm out of time. So it was great. I mean, I was so jazzed about this, and I went to give a talk at a workshop because our papers couldn't be published because they weren't just like all the other papers at that time. But I was talking at the workshop, and somebody asked a question. It's too slow. And now I was smarter than back when I was in the old days. So what I said to him was, wait 20 years. I'm going to finish finally with an allegory. Okay, an allegory is something that's supposed to convey a hidden or ulterior meaning. Okay, so It's going to be a little story. It was in that trip in Japan. We were visiting a bunch of factories. And so there was a group of us, and we were all dressed in bunny suits to go into a clean room. And we had gone through our visit, and our translator took off the cover, and his contact lens fell on the floor. So picture this, there's a bunch of people in bunny suits on a rubber floor looking for a contact lens. It was a hard one, thank God. We were looking like that. And then a robot comes down the street, okay? And it's coming towards us, and we're going faster, trying to, as the robot is coming down. So anyway, it's an allegory, right? So we're looking where the light is on short-term projects, and the future is coming at us, okay? And it's going to run us over, okay? And then the future warns us about this, and it does it by playing a song. So there's the robot coming down towards a doo-dah. This is a song that was written in 1850, right, by Stephen Foster, and it's playing this song for us. So I have a moral for this story. Okay, so, this is serious, right? The future brings surprises, but they're rooted in what came before. It sends us little messages to tell us what's coming. So the question is, what are messages that are being sent to us right now to tell us what we should be working on that will pay off in 20 years? Not LLMs, they'll pay off in 30 seconds. So what should we do 20 years from now? What should we do today that we won't know works until for 20 years? Anyway, not the end. Thank you very much. Sorry it took so long, and enjoy this symposium.